Zork Zero. Chronologically, the first of the main Zork series. However, it was not the first Zork game released. I believe it was actually the fifth game released. It was released in 1998, when graphics for computer games were starting to get better. So we were seeing the slight end of the interactive fiction text parser games. Now, I do say it's chronologically the first in the series. Zork Zero, The Revenge of Megaboss. And it actually starts with a small prelude section in the game, where you literally find out how the curse came about. You then skip, after a brief title screen, to over 900 years into the future, to which the curse is really reaching the end of its power. Now, this has to be said for the game. It was initially, it still used the text parser format that was key to Zork. Everything is descriptive, it's a text adventure. However, each location, depending on where it was, it had a visual interpretation. The border of the screen would change from if you're in the castle to if you're outside, or if you're in a desert or in a forest. You'd sometimes get a little image in the corner, well, before it describes your location. Text games were like that. They gave you enough information to make your choices, or to make everything. Now, this being the first game with images in it, they decided to make the puzzles a bit more visual. And a lot of these puzzles were actually based off classic puzzles. You will see the Towers of Hanoi in it. You will see the, quote, poison number game type game. Knights and knaves. Hell, one section is a huge chessboard. And that was a treat when I figured that one out. It is a beautiful series. Of course, this was also a game in which copy protection was done by inserts. They figured it was just a pain in the butt to copy all the inserts. Well, this was before the internet and such. And Infocom made a good deal of games with inserts, because some of your questions could only be answered by looking at the inserts. A tactic that was also used in games at the time. You had your also you had your other games that worked like that. But a lot of games at the time, part of why they had such big boxes was inside the box was something that helped you get through the game. It was an old form of copy protection. But one thing can always be said about Zork is it's always a visually, even when it was not visual, it was always an in-depth world that you were entering into. In-depth world. And this was a game in where making maps would have been very, very useful. And that's how we used to do all those old games. Make a map, make a map, make a map. So, in the long run, it's just a classic in that sense. However, these were the early computer games, and a game could become totally unwinnable. This one, it was more likely because you tried to break the game rules. In my playthrough, I screwed up the towers of Hanoi and had to restore and redo. But another thing that was evident in the game was that it was the first time in Zork that they introduced a game called Double Finuzzi. And there is nothing in the game that tells you how to win this. However, it is apparently written on one of these inserts about how it can become unbeatable given a certain situation. So, it doesn't matter how much you look on the internet for rules to the game or anything like that. It's just going to tell you it's unbeatable. But it's part of the franchise's history, and it ties in very beautifully with the games that they created for that. Like I said, this came out after the series was first introduced. So they had to find some way to bring it to the original. And hence, they did in a very clever way. Also, there were puzzles that had to be done right. Failure to do it right would probably even end you up in one of the traditional uh, classic ways to die in Zork. You venture into the dark area. It won't give you a description, but it'll tell you have been eaten by a grue. Grues are nasty. I could say so much more about this. I'd love to say more, but most of it comes from the fact that it's part of a legendary franchise. Zork was one of the first adventure games to have multiple entries in it. One of the earliest. All of them text-based. So adding visual to it, they mixed it by having, quote, text adventure, by keeping most of the text, but adding like the visual element just around to give you an idea. The games have a nice little visual element too. And so you have to figure out how to solve them. And like I said, it used a lot of classic puzzles. But a lot of these games would use these classic puzzles in years to come. Plus, as technology was improving, it allowed them to have more space to put the game on. Because games like Zork, the early Zork entries, we didn't have hard drives to save everything on. And that's what makes these games so classic. You could save game. You had enough room to save the game on a disk or onto a separate disk. But in the essence of the game, you had to play it wisely. These were games that could be very unforgiving if you do something stupid. And sometimes chance did not favor you. Such as one of the legendary elements that is in a Zork game is random encounters with certain characters. In this game, it was the Jester. He would show up many times, and he could do anything to you. Have a bed bug show up, an enormous bed bug, or an alligator show up, or make you feel, or I think even a clown nose. So you had to play the game very carefully. And the random encounters just added to the difficulty. But Part of the fun of the Zork franchise has been those random encounters and how much the game relies on you thinking and mapping things out. Today, where games automatically map things for you, this was not an option in the old game, so you had to figure it out on your own and map it out on your own. Of course, the trick was always with a Zork game is you may go north to go to the next scene, but in order to get to it, get back to it, you have to go west. And these games could be tricky and with those enter certain be careful what you enter certain sections with. But it was a fine game and it was a fine introduction and it tied in nicely with games set before, after it in the chronology, even though it came out first. Something a lot of games don't do very well anymore. Especially if you release a prequel game. I mean, look at Castlevania's timeline. They keep adjusting that with every new entry. Zork didn't have that much. And I think also part of it is you had pretty much for a majority of the franchise, you had the same guy working on it. But this was a fine entry. Ties in somewhat very nicely with the first game, but with a slight twist, which I can talk about later. But I know this is short, but this is really all I have to say on Zork Zero. To be honest, I never played it until recently. While the next 3 games in the franchise, chronologically, I did play. But we'll save that until next time. As always, this is Rich Kale here on YouTube, Rich Gen X elsewhere. Thank you very much for listening to this, and have a good one all. Bye.